Hi, I'm Gordon Cox, the contributing theater editor at Variety, and I'm very excited to welcome you to this exclusive Q&A with the cast and creatives of Moulin Rouge the musical. We've got a great lineup of speakers, but I wanted to kick off by welcoming Baz Luhrmann, the director of Moulin Rouge the movie, and talking with him a bit about the journey of Moulin Rouge from the big screen to Broadway. Hi, Baz. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, Gordon. How are you?
I'm great. Moulin Rouge premiered almost 20 years ago now, back in 2001. And
thanks for reminding me of that.
And it played a major role in revitalizing the movie musical as a genre. Thinking back to the late 90s, you'd just finished your movie Romeo and Juliet, and you were coming up with the idea that would become Moulin Rouge. What was the driving force behind the idea, and what did you want to accomplish with it?
Well, I funnily enough, look, I get all my dates and things horrendously mixed up, and I'm not great with, numbers, ask any studio. But I do remember way back, even before Romeo and Juliet, there are these things I've always kind of just said, like, wouldn't it be great if? And often I think, well, that'll be easy. And the funny thing was, I was going, look, as a child growing up in a very small town, we had a black and white television, one channel, and we also ran the local cinema for a while. So in a period in which a lot of people were exposed to the new wave and things like that, which I later became exposed to in cinema, I was being exposed to a lot of, because they got a lot of what they call dumbed down, like package movies, Sunday movies, and they were things like The Red Shoes, funny enough, in black and white. But old musicals, Top Hat, things like that. So I had a great love of the musical just growing up. And I always thought, gee, if you look at it, musicals have a form that they take based on how you decode musical form in a given period, a given time. So if you do an examination of the journey of the musical, Top Hat is so stylized that, Fred and Ginger are on a gloss floor with some drapes, and that's Venice, Right. You get into the later 60s, I'm just plucking a few out of there. Sound of Music starts to go outside, and you've got Nazis in it, albeit, they're kind of nice brown shirts from my memory.
Yeah.
There's a few gags in Sound of Music, we won't go into that, but you get to 70s Cabaret, which is kind of, psychological realism, everything's realist, right? And Cabaret uses Greek chorusing to comment on the story. You have to justify the existence of the music. It just doesn't come out of nowhere. Right. Or the singing. A great device, brilliant movie. I mean, I think it's a masterful piece. So, I'm just thinking back then in the mid-90s, what should I do next? And I'd been doing some opera. I was doing a lot of opera at the time. I did A Midsummer Night's Dream, and I actually researched that in India. And while I was in India, because I'd set it in India, Sim and I and a guy called Bill Marin, we experienced our first Bollywood movie. And what was incredible about that experience was, apart from, there were 2,000 people in the cinema, but that form could have drama, quite serious drama, then crazy, wild musical numbers, stand-up comedy. Now, when I describe that starts to sound a bit like Shakespeare, So I thought, wow, how would you decode the musical for now? That was kind of my beginning. Anyway, long story short, I was walking up a hill with Craig Pierce, and I was going through all my ideas and thinking what I should do, and been working on it for about a week. And then I went the musical, I should do the musical. And I went that'd be quite complicated. So I just did that quick idea about a Shakespeare first. 3 years later, Romeo and Juliet gets finished. Right. So it was really a desire to find a way to reconnect audiences with musical storytelling that wasn't particularly ironic. I mean, I was a great fan of Grease and things like that when I was growing up, But they had irony about them. The musical had to be kind of, had to be sort of ironic and funny, So that was the inspiration, just to bring music theatre cinema.
And the film went on to have quite a legacy. It's had quite a bit of longevity in terms of its popularity and its sort of influence. What for you was sort of most surprising and or satisfying about the life that the film went on to have?
I mean, Gordon, it's hard to think now, right? But when I was gestating it, like 2 years before I made it, or around the period I was writing and working with Craig and musicians and all these musicians. I mean, what the thing that was remarkable was that taking a cue, actually, if you think of it, a lot of cinematic musicals, there was a period in which most of them coming from the stage. So they invented a kind of theatrical cinematic language.
Right.
And I wanted to quote that and yet find some new way as well, sort of mix them in codes, you know?
Right.
But one of the codes of the old musical was that it wasn't always all new music. You know, sometimes they'd say, you know, 6 or 7 new songs, but most of the music was music that had been in other shows that were sing-alongs. It was pop music, popular music. And so often they were taking popular music that was on the radio and putting it into musicals. So people had something to connect with. And I thought, well, I mean, at one stage I was working with Craig and we were trying to solve the idea, well, if Christian is a poet and he's a genius, we actually attempted to write genius poetry. And quite remarkably, when we read it out, people they weren't sure if it was genius poetry. Some even thought it was perhaps bad. So how do we show that someone's a genius musically? And so I brought back this idea of, could we marry the idea of popular vernacular music? There wasn't necessarily show music, you know, like musicals had fallen into a place whereby, not now, but there was a nostalgia about the music. It had to feel a bit like old musicals. Whereas in fact, when they were written, the music was pop music. It was just the music that was on the radio. So that's how that two ideas came together. It's worth remembering, Gordon, that it was very controversial when it opened. I mean, I cannot tell you. You'd think I'd made a slasher film or something, but I think Time magazine had the 2 Richards. I might have got this wrong. And I think Richard thought it was the second best movie of the year, and the other Richard said it was the worst movie of the year. So, you know, people were quite split about it.
Right.
But they're like that about most of the things I do, and they're probably right. You know, I don't know. I just try and tell stories the way that I am, I think, as a person. You know, I'm a bit of a Moulin Rouge musical person.
And it seems like it seems like a natural idea to look at Moulin Rouge, the film, and think, oh, this belongs on a stage. At what point did you actually start thinking about that and taking that idea seriously?
I mean, one thing's for sure, almost all my shows could end up on a stage quite easily.
Right.
I mean, Strictly Ballroom, Romeo and Juliet, I'm thinking about doing that. You know, Gatsby could easily be a stage production. There's been many goes at that. Right. You know, and even my current little piece I'm working on could easily end up on a stage. But Moulin Rouge above all else, because it was a musical. And the thing is that I think, I mean, from day one, really, from when we were making it, but it was always, you know, Carmen Pavlovich has a great company with Jerry, and they're really great company because they really stick behind new ideas and they stay with things. And I had to go at doing a version of Strictly Ballroom, and it did quite well down here. But what I realized was that when I made these shows, I was a certain age. You know, I was expressing something very personal, even though you might not think it if you see the shows. The underlying mythology, the underlying idea was something that was sort of petrol in my creative tank that I was feeling. I went back to visit these shows and I went like, hang on, I'm not, you know, I was like late 30s when I did Moulin Rouge, you know? You're talking to a guy in his late 50s now. And I realized that what I should be doing, and I kind of feel like this in creativity overall, I really want to spend my energy in handing over, passing on, encouraging, supporting new artists that are coming up. And I happen to be, Carmen and I were talking about it, and I happen to be at a friend's place for dinner. And this friend of mine is very good at putting the right people around a dinner table. And I was sitting next to Alex Timbers, whose show I absolutely loved, Here Lies Love. I just thought, wow, and Bloody Andrew Jackson. And he kind of had a sensibility that I thought might have been, you know, if theatrical language were people, we might have been relatives in some way. And I just looked him in the eye and I said, you know, I'm thinking of doing Moulin Rouge. How would you feel about that? And he was pretty positive about the idea, actually.
Yeah. And so then how did you work with Alex as the show developed? What was that conversation like?
I'm glad you bring it up because I really want to be clear on the record for this, is that I myself, growing up, always gravitated towards, you know, either a producing environment or a financing environment of trust and support where they would sort of go like, well, it's kind of not what I would do. It's a bit different, or maybe even very different. But they supported the process and they believed in me as a young creative. And so with Alex, I took the same attitude with him, the team he chose, which were brilliant, and a lot of his choices. And look, I sometimes use the expression, I'm Uncle Baz, you know, it was his journey as the director. It was that team's creative road. I absolutely came in as Uncle Baz and gave notes. And there was a time, I think, around the second act when they were trying to sort some things out. And I think I was relatively helpful there as really the representative of the audience, of going, look, as an audience, I really understand what you're doing, but I don't understand how the A goes to B to C. That's one thing. But I tell you something that's really worth saying and very important is that along the road, Alex and his team were making choices where I went like, I'm not sure I'd do that.
Right.
And, you know, I remembered the voices of those that supported my creative journey. And I went, but I'm here to support you. This is your telling of Moulin Rouge. And, you know, I'm going to support that choice. It was like they're going to add in the new music. And I thought, well, be careful you don't take this song out or that song out because there's a fan base. But actually, in the end, the idea of it as a new postmodern musical, which some people use that title, I'm not wedded to postmodern musical, but it is nonetheless, it's a very old idea, the form of Moulin Rouge, done in a very new way with some quite lateral ideas. So in the same way that hip hop music, which I'm enamored of and have always been inspired by and went on a big journey with the Get Down, took existing music and repurposed it to make new music and new storytelling. That's the underlying code of Moulin Rouge. And of course, in the Bronx, when hip hop started, they thought, those crazy kids, that'll never go anywhere, you know. And that's kind of the journey of Moulin Rouge. So I think the conceit of Moulin Rouge is so robust that all you needed was someone who was a really great storyteller, and any choice they made would have been the right one. And so that's what I want to say, really, Gordon, in way too long a way.
And now that you've seen the show, however many times you've seen it by now,
Quite a few times with a lot of large plastic cups of gin.
Sure, yes. What do you appreciate most about how the show turned out and the way it both kind of honors what you did and then becomes its own thing?
Yeah, God, that's good. It's the first time anything I had anything to do with it. All my films I kind of never see again. I turn up at events and wave them in and stuff, but I never sit there and go, I must watch them. It's the first time I've gone to something that I was, central to the creation of, like a parent, where at a certain point I forgot it was mine and I came only as an audience. And what I was reminded about was, yes, it is fun. It's quite moving. I mean, Karen on some nights rips your hearts out, and Aaron, they can be. They really do. There is an emotion there, but overwhelmingly, the theme of the show is about the bohemian ideal. Now, that's said in a comic way: truth, beauty, freedom, and love. But I think even particularly in the world we are in now, which is a world we don't know what it is, that those ideals of compassion, of young artists trying to, put on a show. Like, look now, I really think. I'm surrounded by a young team, and one of them, they come from theatre in London. People have no creative work. The situation on Broadway just rips your heart out. Things are bad. Shakespeare knew things were bad when you had to close theatres. Right. And so I think about the ideals and the idea of creative ideals and fighting to put on a show and to tell a story that has a point to it, that means something, that uplifts the spirit. So they're the things that started to touch me later on. I realized I would see such a variety of audiences, some audiences who traditionally didn't go to the theatre, coming out of there, and some traditional theatre goers coming out of there and uplifted and moved and ready, I think, having experienced what the theatre should do, which is to reinvigorate the soul and the spirit, and give you an odd hit tune to sing as well. Of anything on the journey of Moulin Rouge the musical that I did that was the right thing, and that Carmen Pavlovich got right on board with, was to choose the right captain of the story, the new director. And I'd like to introduce you now. Here is Alex Timbers.
Alex, it turns out you had a pretty strong connection already to Moulin Moulin Rouge, the movie, even before Baz talked to you about the project. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that ended up informing how you brought Moulin Rouge to the stage?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember seeing the film in 2001 and just loving it. And then for the past 20 years, I've had my own theater company. And the work I do in that theater company and outside of it, a lot of that work is about the sort of collision between history and politics and popular music. So when Baz reached out, I think like 7 years ago, it felt like kismet.
I feel like it's fair to say that Moulin Rouge, the movie, is kind of a love letter to movie musicals. Is it similarly on stage? Is it a love letter to Broadway musicals when you thought about bringing the show to the stage?
That's a fantastic question. Yeah, the movie is like, the references to The Blue Angel, to American in Paris, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. It's like a cinephile's dream. And so when John, Justin, Sonia, and I were starting on this, we definitely were thinking about, is it a Valentine to Broadway and a Valentine to theater? And so that was kind of the launch. And as we go through the show, we can talk about the sort of different reference points, but that was definitely at the forefront of our minds. I mean, this is a story about show people. It's all, everyone in the cast is an artist in a way. And so it felt really important to lean into that. And I think now more than ever, the story about, a theater that's being taken away and the resilience and fortitude of artists. I think the show, to me personally, was very inspiring a year ago. And now it's like something I'm really holding on to, the message of the show.
And the musical vernacular of the stage version is this idea of a mashup, like it sort of mashes up a lot of songs that, not unlike the movie, brings in, were anachronistic, but they are often, kind of smashed back to back, a lot of these songs and these music numbers. What prompted that, and how does that sort of translate into the overall production?
The DNA of of that movie is this like fundamental sort of like wild big swing idea that I think totally works, which is that, how do you know that Christian's the greatest, poet of the last century? Well, he draws on, he's, the author of all the greatest pop hits of the last century. And so, immediately it emotionally triggers all these things, as opposed to us trying to sort of say, this is the greatest lyric ever written, or the great, and so it's a great vocabulary. And so it felt like a huge opportunity when doing the stage show to pull on the last 20 years of music that's happened in the intervening period. And I think, Justin and his team have done a remarkable job of that.
As we're talking about all the new music that goes in, we should also say that some of the favorites from the film are in there as well, including a song called Come What May. We will be premiering a new video, an previously unseen video of Come What May right after this discussion. Before we get to all that, please introduce the three folks who you worked with very closely on this, and tell us about who they are and why they were the right people to work with for this project.
I would love to. So I think, talking about the mashup question, it was also sort of a value in assembling the team to think about people who come from different walks of life and have different experiences. So I think the three people I'm about to, introduce, all four of us sort of come at theater in a different way, but hold the same sort of values dear. And so the first, in theater, it all starts with the writing. And so that's the amazing John Logan is our book writer. He's this incredible playwright who wrote Red, but he also wrote Skyfall and Penny Dreadful and Gladiator. And I think he's someone like me that loves looking at the present through the past, and also has this like real sort of sense of grit and authenticity in the way he writes. And it was perfect for Moulin Rouge. So that's John. Then we have Justin Levine, music supervisor, someone I've known for over 10 years. We've done so many shows together, beginning with Blay Blay Andrew Jackson, which was an emo rock musical set in the 1820s, bizarrely. And he's just a genius. He's a composer, he's a music director, he's an arranger. He wrote an original song for this. He did vocal arrangements. He sort of did everything. And also has this cabaret act, which is amazing, where he takes like R. Kelly songs and puts them in an 1930s vernacular. So genius. So that's Justin Levine. And then we have Sonia Taya, who really marries the world of, I think, theater, pop concerts. She's worked with Miley Cyrus and Madonna and Nicki Minaj, and concert dance, and just brings this like beauty and expressiveness and wit to everything she does.
John, let's start with you. Moulin Rouge is a show that is based on a movie, and all the music, most of the music, is pre-existing, but you approached it as an original musical. Tell us what that means and how that defined your approach.
Yeah, I mean, from the very beginning, the first conversations with Alex, we talked about the difference between theater and cinema. And part of the glory of the film is it's so cinematic. It's whip pans, dissolves, and close-ups. And Baz Luhrmann makes incredible use of every conceivable resource that film offers. And on stage, none of those are possible. You're looking at a proscenium. And so we had to look at it in terms of telling this story without those cinematic devices. But what we had is the power of theater, which is you can see a character, you can get to know them, they can express themselves through song or dance in a very organic way that the audience embraces. So the first thing was looking at the rub between cinema and theater, and then seeing how the best theatrical version of this could evolve for us with all the sort of the standard things we love in musical theater. The 11 o'clock number, the character song, you know, the comedy song, the big dance number, and how that could all weave into the storytelling.
Right. And so as you're thinking about the structure of the show and like rethinking these characters, you're also thinking about the music and the songs and what songs will be used for what numbers and when they will come in. And so I wonder if you and Justin could tell us a little bit about kind of how you work together and how decisions were made about what moments would sing and the ways in which they would sing.
Well, I'll start and then hand over to Justin. I mean, what Alex and Justin and I did is we spent a weekend in a New York hotel locked in with a lot of note cards and a story saying, all right, here's the moment where Satine is going to express her emotion through song. It's her first song. It's the first time anyone sings alone on stage. What's it going to be? And then we discussed options. You know, Alex would bring in options, Justin would bring in options, I would bring in options, and we'd explore them. And Justin has, and I say this quite literally, the most encyclopedic knowledge of music I have ever experienced in my life, from completely cutting edge contemporary to like art songs from 1912 you would never want to hear again, but he has them all at his fingertips. So he would play things. He would like suggest a song and then play a version of it to see how it could fit the emotion of the character, because we were all about, and I think you guys will agree, emotion and storytelling in terms of song choices. Is that fair, Justin? What do you think?
Absolutely. And just to add to that, during this last weekend that we spent together, the three of us, I felt like I was actually attending a master class in adapting a film to the stage, because I was essentially just trying to absorb, you know, and keep up with this conversation of really examining how these elements of film that we don't have at our disposal would have to translate into a different way of telling the story. For example, what the envelope of the world would be. And so I found myself very early on just making a very long dream list of songs and sounds that felt like they could live in these characters' mouths and world. And so, interestingly enough, I am somebody who often really responds to a hook or something that sort of starts from a musical place, and find even to this very day, I'll listen to songs that I've loved for years, and only now, suddenly, because of this show, actually, really dial down into the lyrics and what the meaning of those songs are. And so, as a result, I really ended up going on a deep dive into lyrical content to ensure that it was essentially doing what oftentimes is the challenge with what some call a jukebox musical, which is to continue to tell the story and to express a character's emotions organically.
And of course, to go along with all this music, there is dance, which brings us to you, Sonia. As John mentioned, the movie is, and in many ways, the dance sequences of the movie are sort of defined by this kind of kinetic editing and the super quick cuts that obviously you cannot do on stage. So how did you think about creating a dance for the Moulin Rouge, the music on stage that had the same feeling or that had a different feeling that you felt would be appropriate to the story?
I really wanted to lean into that type of whiplash, overt emotion that I felt when I watched the film. And I I enjoy on my own to mess with momentum and gravity. I get really sad that what goes up must come down. I get really sad that the pace, it's really difficult to have sudden stops. So I test the science of life, often in my dancing, and I work in a highly physical way. So the sweatiness and the steady cam, real cam, the shifting of that, I really tried to hold on to in the momentum and in the dynamic shifts in my choreography. Quite challenging, but really fun, because that's what I emotionally connected to so much, was the grunt and the sweat that you saw in the film, and the urgency of fleeing and wanting, and the desire of love you felt because of the swiftness of the film, and because of the urgency that you felt. And that type of urgency I really tried to find in the movement. And also there was so much excess in it as well, and it lives and breathes in excess. So I piled a bunch on and edited accordingly, but it wasn't just for excess momentum or pile's sake. It was because it was provoking a feeling and a thought to celebrate dance in this way, where you have dance sequences that move without words, without dialogue for a long period of time, and you can still feel like it's carrying the story, and you are clear on the story, and it's driving the story, is really, it's the biggest blessing of a show to choreograph. It's been such a gift.
I wonder if all four of you now could sort of walk us through kind of an anatomy of a scene, and the process of creating it. I feel like the opening number is the one that makes a lot of sense to sort of take us through. Can you tell us about sort of how you conceived that number and then how you executed it? Alex, let's start with you.
Sure. I think one of the first thoughts was, like the movie starts in England, and we wanted the wraparound of the film, of the stage show, to be in the Moulin Rouge. You walk into that place from the beginning, and that's the design you're not back on your heels by. So the first person you really meet are these four, what we call the Lady M's, who start our show with Lady Marmalade. And then you meet our MC, Harold Ziedler. And so I think, some of the references we were excited about, and I'll let the others speak about these, but, it's a cabaret fiddler meeting, here's the aristocracy, here's the proletariats. But then also our references also, just because we're talking about Baz and references, ran all the way over to the Chicago Bulls. So I went to a high school outside of Chicago. That's something that John and I have in common. And one of the things, I was always thinking about in the 90s was, how the Chicago Bulls entered. And so when we have the Duke enter, we follow the same cue sequence. We black out the lights, and then we go Klieg light, blast, ballyhoo, and then they all do a rock and roll fly-in to reveal him. And that kind of excitement, as if he's Michael Jordan, that's what we wanted for this opening number. And that kind of energy just keeps topping itself.
Yeah, and narratively, it's about when you introduce characters. At what point do you meet them? And as Alex said, our whole idea is you take the audience, you grab them by the lapels and say, welcome to the Moulin Rouge. And that's Ziedler's job, because he has so much power working with the Lady M's, with our four sort of protagonist dancer singers there who create the world. And into that world, we then bring characters one at a time. The only thing that we thought was very important is that we don't introduce Satine, our female lead, in this opening sequence, that we keep her back so we can meet her when we've met Christian. So we meet the man who is searching for love, searching for meaning, and then at the same time, he meets his love. So we wanted to keep sort of tease the audience with the idea of Satine, but not actually see her till her entrance.
Tell us a little bit about how this idea of the mashup kind of manifests in the show overall, and sort of the design and the approach to the physicalizing the world.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that was really important to us was this idea, the movie's so immersive. And I think that in the stage adaptation, the two things that were at the forefront of our minds just every step of the way were emotion and community. And so one of the first choices was, how do we take that kind of immersive quality, kick over the footlights, and embrace the audience, bring them into the Moulin Rouge? And so that's done a number of different ways. That's through passerelles and runways and a 360 design by Derek McLean, that where if you're in the last seat of the balcony or you're in the front row, you're as much a part of the show. And for me, that's sort of a fundamental value of theater. I've done like 9 Broadway shows, and every one of them has direct address, because I think that celebration of that sacred act of us all being a part of a story together on either side of the footlights is really important. And I think that extends to, the music, taking stuff that feels period, taking stuff that feels contemporary, and mashing them together as a lens to look at how do we look at the present through looking at the past. And so I think that's the value of the mashup. And I think that's what, the acting company and the rest of the creative team has really taken to heart.
And then how does that manifest musically? Is there, Justin, what was your work on the musical side of this?
I don't even know where to begin on this one. And I'm trying to also remember. Yeah, I would say, to Alex's point, thank you, Alex, for referencing Cabaret and Fiddler, that really we were looking primarily for motifs. And so really trying to identify what sounds and references would be the best way to hook the audience into these different characters and groups within the world. And so that was really where I was coming from at this point, because both specifically for the opening and in general, one of the advantages of working with known music is that you are essentially able to, in a split second from the moment that the audience recognizes the hook of the song, tap into an emotional history that the audience has to that song. And so that was a big driving force with our work. And of course, I think we all, one thing we definitely all agreed on was that Lady Marmalade was going to open up the show and take us into the world of it. So that always felt right as the baseline and envelope of the opening itself.
As we talk about sort of the idea of introducing these characters, or at least the onstage version of these characters that many people will know, we should also bring on the actors who play all these characters and embody them on stage. So let's bring on Karen Olivo, Aaron Tveit, Danny Burstein, Sa Ngauja, and Robin Herder. Hi, everyone. Now that I've got all 9 of you here on the screen, congratulations on all your Tony nominations. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Karen, I wonder if we could start by talking to you about Satine. We've talked a little bit about this already in the conversation, but tell me a little bit about how and why the Satine we see on stage is different from the Satine we saw in film.
Sure, yeah. I think that the reason that she's different has a lot to do with the team's vision of how they wanted Satine to operate in the narrative. I am also a huge fan of the movie, and I loved everything that Nicole Kidman did, and I loved how she functioned in that. And I know that when they asked me to be a part of this and I auditioned, one of the things that I was told was, we want her to have grit. The idea that she is, in essence, a sex worker, much older, has been around the block. Those are the things that we want her to display, and those are the tools that we want to see. And so I think that was sort of the idea that she's not an ingenue. There's nothing about her that's an ingenue. She's still putting on the paint to sort of cover the cracks, and she's trying to get one last show out. I think that all of that lends itself to why she has a very different kind of presence for this Moulin Rouge.
And for the other collaborators, how did the idea that that Karen was going to be playing Satine, and particularly her voice, influence kind of your choices with the character, and also what songs she sang?
Well, I can first just say that I think this is one of the hardest roles vocally to play, because you have to essentially occupy the space of a leading lady, but also be able to sing contemporary music, and not just contemporary music of one style, but several styles, where it feels authentic and also still feels part of this world and part of this character's journey. And so Karen is a powerhouse and incredible for rising to that challenge. And so I think that, at least I'll speak from a musical standpoint, that Karen's power and versatility is a huge part of what makes this version of Satine possible. And I will also say that I think, whereas the version of Satine that exists in the film, it is more of, does have a bit more of an ingenue, and this kind of, this vibe of somebody who's kind of wasting away before our very eyes. Karen is an incredibly powerful, commanding performer, and also is an incredible, beautiful, bold woman of color. And it was important that this score reflects the world that is on our stage, and not just how it has been done before. And so it was really important that when we kick off the diamond sequence, the first notes you hear are from a song sung by and performed by a woman of color, and that we established that this is not going to be your mama's diamonds are a girl's best friend.
Aaron, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about doing a thing that you do and a lot of other performers in the show do, which is you take these songs that are, as Justin was talking about, are written as pop songs and are often sort of only about one thing, and turning them through your performance into character songs. How did you think about approaching these songs, most of which you probably knew, in an entirely new way, and adding new life to them?
Yeah, I think I probably knew every song that I had to sing as a pop song. But what was so fascinating is once I started working on it, that sense of them as a pop song or existing only in that pop space kind of went away. And I think that goes back to what Justin and Alex and John were speaking of, is they put so much effort in before we even stepped in the room of making sure that every single pop song worked as a narrative device in our show. And so it was very, very quickly, I was able to kind of totally separate thinking of any of them as a pop song, and it just became a part of the fabric of the arc that my character was going on. And I think that's a testament to the work that they did a long time ago. And I just think it works so beautifully. And that's something that's so difficult to do. And I think that they just completely nailed it.
Is that something that you have to contribute to as a performer as well, in terms of, particularly in the beginning, in terms of making sure that the audience buys into this idea that here are these songs that they know in one context, but they're going to be required to listen to them in a new way, to think about them as a character moment for your character, for instance?
It's definitely something I've never encountered before. And I think we all can speak to the fact of, at our show, I think probably our first audience in Boston, we realized there were multiple things happening, right? The audience is recognizing, and Justin touched on this, the audience is recognizing a song that they know, and they have their own emotional attachment to that song. But then the people that were familiar with our story all of a sudden have like a second acknowledgement where they know how that emotional narrative is affecting our story. And then we have a third group of people who are just going on the linear story, hearing it. So we have all of these different reactions within songs and different reactions within the mashups. That is something like I've never experienced before in a musical. And I think, it adds to what Alex was saying about the audience being a part of our show, is that almost became a part of the world that we were creating, that I think is very, very unique for our show. And then it's not breaking the fourth wall. It's not pulling any focus. It's just a part of the fabric of the evening that is Moulin Rouge in the theater.
And so in addition to the roles that you and Karen play as sort of the central lovers, one of the most memorable characters from the film is Harold Ziedler, who's the impresario of the Moulin Rouge, who is played by Danny Burstein. Danny, this is your 18th Broadway show.
It is. I'm old.
Is there anything, are there things about Moulin Rouge that make it unlike any other Broadway show that you've done?
Well, I'll be honest with you. That's why I chose to do it. It was so unique, so different. Alex asked me to do it. He handed me the script in a diner on 72nd Street and Broadway, and he said, read this, and I'll see you in a week. And we met a week later, and it was unlike anything I'd ever done before. And that's what's exciting to me as an actor, to find things that I'd, just blow my skirt up in a different way. And this completely did that for me.
Yeah. Can you specify a little bit for us what in particular this role allows you to do that we've never seen you do before?
Well, he's kind of dirty and sexy. And yet he's a father figure, and he is also a producer, an impresario. He keeps this family together, and I don't think of myself. I think of myself as a kid from the Bronx, a Jewish kid from the Bronx, who grew up speaking Spanish, and I don't think of myself as anyone like that. This larger than life character. It was completely different. And I thought, yeah, I'd love to see how this plays out. And I mentioned to Alex at our first meeting that the movie was so unique to cinema. I'd never seen anything like it. And I thought it stood alone. And I said, it's going to be difficult for us. We're going to have to create something so unique to the theater in the same way that the movie is unique to cinema. And I wondered whether we were up to the challenge. But as soon as you walk in that theater, with that pre-show that we have going on and that gorgeous set, you know that you're in for something very, very special. And that is something that is completely unique to theater in the most exciting, beautiful way.
And your role is kind of the MC of the entire show.
Yeah.
Tell us about sort of how you interact with the audience and how that ends up influencing your performance every night.
Basically, years ago, I did a show with Tony Randall, and he had a direct address to the audience. And I marveled at how good he was at it. And I asked him how he did it. And he said, well, you must love your audience. And I thought, that's a great way to look at it. They're with you every single night. And it's amazing how 1,500 people can have a collective mind, after like 10 seconds. And they'll tell you how they want to be treated, whether they're there for the ride or you have to tease them. Every night it is different, but every night it's incredibly exciting too.
All these characters we've been talking about so far have been fictional, but there's one character in particular who is based on a real person and plays an important role in Moulin Rouge. That's the painter Toulouse-Lautrec, who's played by Sa Ngauja. For you, Sa, how did you approach this character, this historical character, through the lens of, this kind of crazy mashup world of Moulin Rouge? How did you think about both the history of it and how that history can exist in this world?
That started with a lot of research, trying to consume as much about Henri Toulouse-Lautrec as I possibly could, which still, it's still ongoing. And through every stage of the process that I was involved in from a few years back, I tried to keep at the forefront of my mind while approaching John's script, what Toulouse-Lautrec's life was like, what it was about, and what the events of the fictional storyline of Moulin Rouge would have meant to that real person. And I tried to infuse, sometimes subtly, sometimes overtly. John was also very keen at sort of watching the nuances and the tonality of how we were dealing with the characters throughout the rehearsal and the developmental processes, and infusing that texture in the way that he was guiding the character through the different versions. So that's kind of like the initial approach.
Yeah. And the role is sort of expanded in a way from what we see in the film. Can you tell us about kind of how in what ways your character develops and what that allows you as an actor to do with Toulouse-Lautrec?
Well, yeah. He's definitely expanded in this show as a comparison to Baz Luhrmann's version, and in this one, well, we kind of get to see Toulouse-Lautrec sort of moving between the different worlds, that are operating inside of the Moulin Rouge, in a slightly more intricate way, or kind of feeling the pulse or the heartbeat of the moment of that time in the 1890s Paris, through the energy of Toulouse-Lautrec as he relates to Satine, or as he relates to Ziedler, or as he relates to Aaron and Santiago, and so in that way he is kind of like an energetic sort of pervading vibration that exists between the different characters and their relationships, and overall in the piece to whatever degree.
And Robin, you play a Moulin Rouge dancer named Nini. You're one of the Lady M's that was mentioned earlier in this discussion. You tell us about sort of the role that you and the Lady M's play in the show.
Her name was Nini Petes-en-l'air, and she was basically kind of like the dance captain, if you put it in today's terms. She was the dance captain of the girls. She would come and recruit them, and she'd bring them up into her apartment or someone's apartment, and she would literally train the girls and break their backs and try to get them to do these weird tricks. So, and she had this really amazing move where she would just put her leg up in the air and just like nerve tap her foot in the air, and that gave her name. Just a little history on that. I get to be one of the four beasts that opens up this gorgeous underworld and just invites people in to this 2.5 hours of pure theatrical ecstasy. I mean, it's just so much. It's really a lot after not doing it for 7 months to hear every single one of you talk about our show. It's not like we forgot, but it's like, oh my gosh, yes, we actually are a part of this sensation that just exploded on Broadway. And I've never felt more like a rock star. They give us the most beautiful entrance. You see hearts fly up, you see curtains go away, and then you get these snaps and this build up, and you get to flip around, and you just get to stomp and charge like Alex says, like wolves. And we get to, sort of gently, but not gently, welcome the audience into our world. And what's fun with us is that we have full access to break the fourth wall, which is one of my favorite parts when we do get that rare chance to do while I'm performing. So it's pretty exciting to get to, sometimes if you feel that like they're up to it, you get to touch an audience member, but we get to really have that connection, and you can feel that energy on the other side, just with this imaginary like wall that they think that they can't touch us, but the energy is like flowing through it, and it's really remarkable.
Oh, it's also a pretty physically demanding number, as is a lot of the show for you and for everyone on this call right now, all the performers on this call right now. Tell us about kind of sustaining doing that 8 times a week.
Wow. Well, there's a lot. Everybody has their own thing. I think we can all say we need to rest, we need to hydrate, and we need to keep our bodies strong, whether it's we have an amazing physical therapist, Laura Beinwell, that is basically our Lord and Savior. All of us, actually, Danny, Karen, Aaron, so we're like her regulars. Funny enough, every single person in the show, it is so, like Sonia said, it's excessive, but in the right way. It needs that danger and that intensity. And all of us are very intense people, and there's not one moment that we're not giving it 160%. And after a while, that will just, it depletes you. So yeah, drink your water, get your 8 hours.
This is a question for all the performers, actually. Do you remember what it was like for you to walk into the theater and see the set there for the first time?
It's on film. They filmed us seeing the set for the first time in Boston, and I think because we all had worked on it. You know, you work on it in a rehearsal space, you work on it in a lab that's kind of like a theater, and you're working on this material, and for me anyway, I don't know if you guys felt this way. That hadn't entered my mind yet, and so I think when we all walked into the theater, it just took a whole different leap in that direction of realizing the scale of what this was.
Also, like, that's your office. Like, that's the office that I get to do my work in. And it is the most incredible dream. And someone has actually created it. I felt so grateful. And also, immediately, I felt like, oh, Karen, you need to step up your game, because this is the backdrop. You have to be so fantastic that they're not just looking at the incredible work that Derek McLean has done behind you. But yeah, grateful. Ooh.
That's what's also so amazing about Alex and his imagination is that the idea of creating the world inside the theater right when you walk in. So you're not just seeing the world in front of you, you're seeing it in your backspace, and you're feeling it in your backspace when you're sitting down and in your peripheral. That's genius. You walk in and you say, okay, here is my escape for 2.5 hours. This is where I live. And this is where I'm going to embody this idea for 2.5 hours. It's really quite remarkable. And you see the mood change. It's when you have that embodiment, when you walk into a theater, that it's just red velvet, beautiful chandeliers, and the lighting is gorgeous, and all of these, the pre-show is going on. It really sets a standard that's so mysterious and beautiful.
And one design element that we haven't talked about yet are Catherine Zuber's costumes, which are also a big contributor to sort of character. Can one of the performers maybe speak to how your particular costume or costumes influenced your performances?
Honestly, without the costume, I think being Satine would be close to impossible, because I truly need the vessel that she created. I have like all of the heart and all of the stuff, but it's that silhouette. It's that structured, that highly structured, hypersexualized silhouette that makes Satine the dream of every single person that sees her, that I needed to sort of take me the rest of the way. And because it is so, every piece had so much intricacy. To me, it felt like a little bit of more armor and more tools for her to use. Knowing that the silhouette looked the way it did when I turned to the side, that was something as an actor I could use if I'm trying to be a little bit more seductive, show how the beating goes down all the way and caresses the bum, use that. So the way that they put these pieces together, if you could hold one in your hands, you would be like, put this in a museum. But it really did. It's the marriage of actor and the tool that they need to do the actual work.
And Moulin Rouge, like every Broadway show, has been shut down since March 12th due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which was something that hit your cast particularly hard. Aaron and Danny, you two have, in particular, personal experience with COVID-19. How are you guys doing now?
Yeah, I'm all better. I think looking back, I was probably sicker than I thought I was, because I think we were all so at the beginning of this whole thing, and I also think ignorance is bliss. If I knew what I knew about it now, I think I probably would have been a lot more scared at the time. But I was very, very lucky. I had a mild case. Danny can speak about the difficulties he had. But the thing is, it's a real thing, and it's still around, and people just really need to take this seriously.
I was in the hospital for 6 days with it, and it was not something anybody wants to go through. I'm doing much better. Still occasionally, like once a month for a couple of days, I'll have, swelling in my hands and I'm extremely tired at certain hours, but then it goes away for a while. And so I'm hoping that it just goes away eventually completely.
And let's talk a little bit about how some of you have been spending your time during the shutdown. Karen, I know you were very active in the Black Lives Matter movement, and sort of the fight for equality in the theater. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
My friend and I, Eden Espinosa, we started an organization called AFACT, which is Artists for Economic Transparency. And it's sort of on the heels of, when our doors shut and all of these shows closed, actors were sort of scattered. We really didn't have much of a safety net. And so I started looking at structures in the same way, racial inequity is something that we should all be talking about and we should all be thinking about. But specifically for me, I felt like I needed to look at it in my industry. And so we decided to just be an organization that educates people on structures. So if you know the structure, you can see the inequity and therefore you can have the conversation to change it and restructure it.
Yeah, well, we are looking forward to the day when we can see all of you on stage again in Moulin Rouge. But before we go, let's finish up with this never before seen video of Come What May. Alex, do you want to tell us a little bit about what this is?
Sure. This is Karen and Aaron, two incredible performers doing this incredible number arranged by Justin Levine, our incredible supervisor.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you, Alex, for being here. And thanks to all of you for being here for this Variety streaming room discussion about Moulin Rouge, the musical. And as I said, we can't wait to see it on stage again when you're all back. Now here's Come What May.
Because you still believe in happy endings and I know better.
But why else suffer through this life, if not for love? Just for a moment. Believe in happy endings. Never knew I could feel like this. Like I'd never seen the sky before. I want to vanish inside your kiss. Every day I love you more and more. Listen to my heart, can you hear it sing? Telling me to give you everything. Seasons may change, winter to spring, but I love you until the end of time. Come what may, come what may, I will love you until my dying day.
Suddenly the world seems such a perfect place. Suddenly it moves with such a perfect grace.
Suddenly my life doesn't seem such a waste.
It all revolves around you, and there's no mountain too high, no river too wide. Sing out this song and I'll be there by your side. Storm clouds may gather and stars may collide,
But I love you
I love you
until the end.
until the end of time.